This is not a story about strangers. It is about family, the kind you believe will protect you until the moment they don't. One weekend at a reunion, years of sacrifice disappeared into someone else's pockets. What followed was not loud revenge, but the quiet work of standing up, piece by piece. This is the story of losing everything I saved for, and finding something stronger in return. Before I continue, show some love, like the video and follow for more shocking stories. I had done this 1,000 times before. The small ritual of Monday mornings: brew a cup of coffee, sit at the kitchen table, open the laptop, and check the numbers that told me whether my plan was still intact. Usually it was uneventful. My savings climbing slowly, a testament to years of restraint, of saying no when others said yes. But that morning, the moment the app finished loading, the air around me shifted. The screen showed a balance I couldn't reconcile with my life. $3 to 11.28. At first, my mind refused it. I blinked, refreshed the page, closed the app, opened it again. Still the same number. A fog set in, not dramatic, but heavy, the kind that narrows your thoughts down to fragments. It wasn't just money missing. It was years, choices, skipped vacations, secondhand coats, the steady rhythm of sacrifice. All of it gone in a single weekend. I gripped the edge of the table, staring at the digits. My heart raced, but I sat perfectly still, as if not moving would reverse what I was seeing. Denial is a strange comfort. It tells you there must be some mistake, some technical error, some glitch waiting to be corrected. For a few moments, I almost believed that, then memory started sorting itself. A family reunion. A borrowed phone. Oddly specific questions about my savings. A Rolex on a wrist that shouldn't have been able to afford it. My sister's sudden silence. Brandon's too bright smile. The weekend replayed like film spliced together, each frame pointing to the same truth I didn't want to name. I whispered to myself, no. Not them. Not family. But the voice in my head answered back, who else? I picked up the phone with shaking hands and called the bank. After a labyrinth of menus, a woman's calm voice finally broke through the hold music. She asked for verification, for passwords and details, her tone professional but detached, as if she were describing the weather. 3 transfers were made over the weekend, she said. All from your registered device. I tried to keep my voice even. I didn't make them. Were there any moments when someone else had access to your phone? Her question hit harder than the numbers had. I remembered the cabin kitchen, my hands wet from rinsing dishes, Brandon leaning against the counter, holding my phone casually as if it were his. I had dismissed the banking app being open later that night as a mistake of my own. Now I knew better. I'll file a fraud report, the woman continued. But because the transfers were authenticated from your device, the investigation may take time. Her words blurred together. I thanked her, hung up, and sat in silence. The apartment felt different, smaller. The coffee on the table had gone cold, untouched. The thought of calling Tiffany surfaced, but I knew she wouldn't answer. She never did when accountability was involved. And if she did, it would be excuses, deflections, or silence. Brandon, on the other hand, would laugh. I could almost hear it, his careless snort, his rehearsed lines about family helping family, about needs greater than mine. The betrayal didn't roar. It settled in quietly, filling every corner of the room with a stillness I couldn't shake. It wasn't just about money. It was the weight of being seen as disposable by the people who should have been safest. I leaned back in my chair and whispered the truth I had been circling around. They took it. The words didn't bring relief, but they gave shape to the storm in my chest. That morning became the first line in a new story I hadn't chosen. The chapter where trust unraveled, where family lines blurred into fault lines, and where the quiet certainty I had built my life on began to crack. I didn't yet know what the next steps would be: police, lawyers, or something else entirely. All I knew was this: the ground had shifted beneath me, and nothing would be the same again. I didn't call Tiffany right away. I couldn't. My hands hovered over the screen, but the thought of hearing her voice mixed with his laughter stopped me cold. Instead, I called my parents. It was instinct, the old belief that if something went wrong, they would steady me. My mother's voice came through warm and unsuspecting. Honey, what a nice surprise. Did you make it home safe from the reunion? I paused. Just the sound of her voice reminded me of Sunday dinners, of being the one who never caused trouble, the child who didn't ask for much. And then I said it. Mom, have you seen Tiffany or Brandon today? Oh yes, she replied, cheerful. They stopped by this morning. They had the new car with them. It's beautiful. Brandon said his investment finally paid off. The words landed like stones. New car. Investment. Paid off. I didn't need a translation, Mom, I said carefully. That money came from me. They transferred it out of my account while we were at the reunion. Silence stretched for a long beat. Then my father's voice cut in. He must have picked up the other line. Carissa, let's not jump to conclusions. I'm sure there's an explanation. I gripped the phone tighter. Dad, there is no other explanation. The bank confirmed it was from my device, while Brandon had my phone. It was them. My mother sighed. Even if that's true, do you really want to make this bigger than it already is? Tiffany is your sister. Families go through things. For the sake of peace, for the sake of peace? My voice cracked, sharp in a way it rarely was with them. They stole everything I worked for. My house. My future. And you're asking me to keep quiet? My father tried again, softer this time. We just don't want to see the family torn apart over money. I let out a bitter laugh. It's not just money. It's trust. And it's gone. The call ended without resolution, just a hollow reminder of the old family script. Tiffany was the one protected, and I was the one expected to endure. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake replaying the conversation, hearing my parents' voices, bending themselves into familiar shapes. Protect Tiffany, excuse Brandon, ask me to be reasonable. The cycle was endless. But for the first time, I realized I didn't have to participate. The next day, messages began rolling in from relatives who had already heard some version of the story. Brandon was quick. He had painted me as dramatic, unstable, overprotective. Of money I didn't really need. The story was already moving through the family like weather, shaping itself to old beliefs, the easy narrative that I was too rigid, too serious, too unwilling to forgive. My cousin Emma called. She had sat beside me at the reunion dinner, heard my excitement about the house. Her voice was cautious but kind. Carissa, is it true? Did Tiffany really? Yes, I said flatly. It's true. All of it. I believe you, she whispered. I always saw how they leaned on you. But you know how the family is. They'll say you should let it go. Her words didn't surprise me. What surprised me was my answer. I can't let it go this time. For years I had carried the weight of being the steady one, the rational one, the sister who forgave, the daughter who compromised. I had thought it was strength. But lying awake in the dark, I saw it for what it was, silence that enabled their chaos. It was easier for everyone else if I stayed quiet. Easier if I absorbed the betrayal and swallowed my anger. That was the script, written long ago in subtle lines of favoritism and excuses. Tiffany the fragile one, Brandon the ambitious one, me the strong one who didn't need protecting, but now the cost of that script was staring at me in the form of an empty account. My sacrifices erased in a weekend. My future delayed because their lives always took priority. And for the first time, I felt the edges of that identity fall away. When my father left another voicemail urging me to think carefully before you act, I deleted it without listening to the end. When my mother texted me that Tiffany was very upset by my accusations, I put the phone face down and didn't answer. I wasn't going to play my old part anymore. Instead, I began to write. Not a letter to them, but notes to myself. A timeline of events. Dates, transfers, the exact moment Brandon had my phone, the watch on his wrist, the questions he asked at dinner. Each detail anchored me. The fog from that first morning began to clear. I realized that evidence was stronger than excuses. Facts carried a weight their stories couldn't bend. And if my parents chose not to see it, others would. For the first time, the thought of moving forward didn't terrify me. It steadied me. Family words had always been louder than facts. But now, I was choosing differently. I was choosing to stand outside the storm of excuses and build something solid, something that didn't require their approval. The old script had broken. And I wasn't going to tape it back together. I stopped waiting for anyone to do the seeing for me. I opened a blank document and wrote a timeline, the reunion dates, the moments my phone left my hand, the exact time the balance shifted. I listed questions in short lines so I couldn't dodge them. Who touched the device? Where were we standing? What did I ignore because it felt easier? I called Julia first. She didn't offer scripts or outrage. Tell me what you need, she said. I told her I needed steadiness. Then that's what I'll be, she answered. We set a plan, collect proof, file reports, speak precisely. No extra stories. No pleading. I went to the bank even though the fraud report was already open. The associate printed a ledger of transfers, device IDs, and authorization methods. I know, I said. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to document. She nodded and hole-punched the pages. At home. I spread everything on the table like a map. I screen captured the app, downloaded statements, and sorted them by date. I pulled my phone usage logs, then highlighted the hour on Friday night when Brandon paced the porch, head down, thumbs moving. I remembered the cabin camera my parents installed last year after a neighbor's break-in. I had ignored it then. Now it felt like a hinge. The caretaker answered on the second ring. Can I help you? He asked. I need the porch footage for Friday night, I said. Family matter. He paused. Your dad said you might call. I can pull the clips for you to pick up. I thanked him, drove 3 hours without the radio, and watched the lake light flicker through the trees. He handed me a drive and a labeled envelope. It's all there, he said. You'll see timestamps and faces. I appreciate you, I said. He shrugged. Sometimes a camera is just a mirror. Back home, I watched the clips. There he was, Brandon on the porch at 9:43. My phone in his hand, the glow on his face. He wasn't casual. He was focused in the way people are when they believe no one is watching. At 9:46 he lifted the phone, read something, then typed for a long stretch. At 9:51 he tucked the device into his pocket and smiled into the dark. The transfer on my statement was 9:48. I paused the frame and took stills. I wrote a caption under each image the way a quiet voice would speak. Here is the phone. Here is his hand. Here is the minute your life tilted. Julia came over with a legal pad and 2 highlighters. We built a binder, section 1 for the bank, section 2 for device logs, section 3 for the video, section 4 for prior loans with dates and amounts. Why include the old stuff? She asked. Pattern, I said. Not for rage. For context. She nodded and printed receipts. From my email archives. We worked quietly. I filed a police report that afternoon. The officer listened, then asked careful questions. Do you have proof he had the phone? Yes. Do you have the timing of the transfers? Yes. When I handed over the binder, he turned pages slowly. This is thorough, he said. I left with a case number and a copy of my statement. The weight in my chest shifted. It was contained. That night my parents called again. I let it ring twice, then answered. My mother's voice was soft. Sweetheart, can we meet and talk this through? I kept my tone level. I'm moving forward. You can come with me, or you can stand back. But I'm not standing still. My father tried next. Are you sure you want to involve the police? I didn't involve them. The theft did. They went quiet. We love you, he said. Then trust me, I said, and ended the call. Sleep didn't come easily, but it came. I woke with a plan. I contacted a lawyer a colleague recommended, a man named Stephen whose calm way of speaking made space for breath. Bring what you have, he said. We'll decide the rest after we look. In his office, I laid the binder on his desk. He read in silence, tapping a pen when the timestamps aligned. This is strong, he said. We'll file a civil claim and coordinate with the investigation. It won't be quick, but it will move. Will I have to testify against my sister? I asked. He met my eyes. You'll have to tell the truth. Sometimes they are the same thing. On the way home, I stopped at a hardware store and bought a lockbox, a shredder, and a notebook with thick paper. At the register, the clerk didn't make small talk. He just bagged the tools that would keep my future from being so easy to touch. Back at my apartment, I enabled new passcodes, turned on alerts, and wrote a sentence on the first page of the notebook. I choose fact over permission. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt aligned. Anger wanted noise, evidence wanted order. Each line I added to the record was a plank in a bridge back to myself. Not to the old dream. To something steadier. When I slid the binder onto the shelf, I recognized the shift. I was no longer waiting for belief. I was preparing for accountability. The story had changed shape again. Not smaller. Clearer. I didn't rehearse what to say. By the time I drove to their house, the words had already lived in me long enough to find their own shape. What I carried instead was a folder thick with dates and screenshots, and a steadiness that felt new. Their street looked ordinary. Lawns cut short, cars lined up, windows open to the mild air. But their driveway told a different story, the black SUV still with temporary plates, a bold monument to what had been taken. I parked down the street, sat for a long moment with the engine off, and let my breath catch up to my body. Then I stepped out and walked to their door. Brandon opened it. His smile was quick, automatic, practiced. Carissa, what a surprise, he said, leaning on the frame like he owned the world. We need to talk, I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Inside, Tiffany froze mid-motion, her hands clutching a shopping bag with a brand name I had only seen in store windows. She looked at me, then at Brandon, then down at the floor. The silence between us was thick with things unsaid. What's this about? Brandon asked, arms folding across his chest. The charm slipped a little, replaced with something harder. You know what it's about, I answered. I pulled the folder from under my arm and placed it on their coffee table. 3 transfers. Friday night. Saturday afternoon. Sunday morning. All while you had my phone. He smirked. You can't prove that. I opened the folder. First the bank statements, then the device logs, then the still frame of him on the cabin porch, phone glowing in his hand. Each page landed with the weight of fact. For a moment, the room went quiet. Tiffany's eyes darted between the papers and Brandon's face. Her fingers tightened on the shopping bag until the paper crinkled, then he laughed, sharp and careless. So what if I did? We needed it more than you. You're single, no kids, nothing to worry about but yourself. We have a family. The words sank deep, cutting through the silence. My jaw tightened. It wasn't yours to take. Tiffany's voice finally broke through, small and uneven. Carissa, please, I turned to her. Please what? Pretend this didn't happen? Watch you drive away in my future while I start over from nothing. Her eyes filled, but she didn't answer. She glanced at Brandon, who gave her the smallest nod, as if reminding her which side she belonged on. Look, he said, stepping closer. Family helps family. You've always had it easy. Good job, steady paycheck. This just evens things out. I stared at him, the weight of his entitlement pressing against every scar of restraint I had carried. Even? You stole 5 years of sacrifice. Do you have any idea what it cost me to save that money? He shrugged, his smirk curling again. Then save it again. Faster this time. The cruelty in his tone was sharper than the theft itself. My sister flinched at the words, but still she stayed beside him. I felt anger rising, but I didn't let it take the room. Instead, I pressed my palms against the folder, grounding myself. I came here to give you one chance, I said quietly. Return the money, agree to a plan, and maybe we could keep this between us. But if you won't, the police and the bank already have everything they need. I'm not standing down. Brandon's face darkened. If you do that, the family will know exactly what kind of person you are. Selfish. Cold. Throwing blood under the bus. I held his gaze. No. They'll know what kind of person you are. And maybe they'll finally stop pretending not to see it. For the first time, his confidence cracked. Not much, just a flicker in his eyes. Tiffany shifted uncomfortably, her lip trembling. I picked up the folder and slid it back under my arm. This is your warning, I said. The next conversation won't be in your living room. No one spoke. Tiffany's tears slipped silently down her face. Brandon stood rigid, arms crossed, jaw tight. I turned and walked to the door. My steps felt heavy but sure, like they belonged to someone who had stopped asking for permission. Outside, the air hit cooler than I expected. I walked to my car without looking back, though I could feel their eyes following me through the glass. Once inside, I closed the door and sat still, letting the quiet swallow the noise of their house. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't begged. I had given them facts and boundaries. And in doing so, I realized something I hadn't known until that moment. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about the part of me that had always bent, finally standing straight. As I started the engine, their laughter didn't follow me this time. Only silence. A silence that felt like the first breath of a new chapter. The days after the confrontation blurred into a rhythm of paperwork, phone calls, and silence. I hadn't expected justice to be swift. I had only expected it to begin. And it did, though not in the dramatic way some part of me might have once imagined. There were no slammed doors or shouting matches in the street. Just forms, signatures, statements, and the slow grind of systems designed to measure truth more than emotion. The police called first. The officer who had taken my report asked me to come in and verify details. Bring your documentation, he said. I carried the binder, now heavier with printed photos of Brandon holding my phone. He looked at the images carefully, his expression neutral. This will help, he said. It wasn't comfort. It was fact, and fact was enough. The bank followed with their own investigation. Emails arrived with requests for device IDs, transaction histories, confirmation of login alerts. Each time I responded, I felt another layer of fog lifting. It was no longer just my word against theirs. It was my word, backed by records that did not bend to charm or excuses. Meanwhile, life went on. Work required me to show up, to sit in meetings, to analyze numbers for clients whose accounts dwarfed my own loss. Some days the irony stung so sharply I had to excuse myself to the bathroom just to breathe. I would stand there under the harsh fluorescent lights, staring at my reflection, whispering, "You'll get it back." Piece by piece. Then I'd return to the conference room and resume my role, the reliable analyst who never lost her balance. My parents kept calling. Each voicemail carried the same plea: let it go, sweetheart. Don't ruin the family over this. I saved them, not as reminders of guilt but as evidence of how deep the script ran. For years, they had mistaken my silence for strength, my compliance for harmony. Now, their words only strengthened my resolve. Julia remained the only voice I allowed. Close. She stopped by with groceries, checked in without hovering, and sometimes just sat across from me while I sorted through files. You don't have to fill the silence, she told me once. I know what it means. And she was right. Sometimes the silence wasn't emptiness, it was proof that I was holding my ground. The first tangible consequence arrived in the form of a freeze notice. Brandon and Tiffany's joint accounts were locked pending investigation. The SUV in their driveway, once a symbol of victory, now sat with a lien notice taped to the windshield. I didn't see it myself, but Emma texted me. A picture with no caption. Just the image of paper fluttering against tinted glass. I didn't feel triumph. I felt balance returning in small, deliberate steps. In the meantime, I made changes of my own. I closed old accounts and opened new ones with stricter protections. Two-factor authentication became as natural as breathing. I bought a fireproof safe for documents and started an emergency fund no one else knew about. Each measure was practical, but more than that, it was symbolic. For once, my security didn't depend on trust alone. Counseling sessions began with Tiffany, reluctantly at first. She came without Brandon, her posture small, her voice fragile. In the early sessions, she said little more than, "I don't know why I let it happen." I didn't answer. I let the silence hang, because it wasn't mine to fill anymore. Over time, her sentences grew longer, circling guilt, excuses, and then, slowly, accountability. It wasn't absolution. It was the beginning of her reckoning. The middle stretch of justice is the hardest, too far from the wound to feel urgency, too far from resolution to feel relief. It is waiting without guarantees. Some nights, I questioned if it was worth the cost. The lost house. The fractured family. The hours spent with lawyers and investigators. But then I would open the binder, flip through the pages, and remind myself, this wasn't about punishment. It was about alignment. About living in a way that didn't require me to keep swallowing betrayal for the sake of peace. I saw Brandon once during that period. It was in the courthouse lobby, both of us waiting for different hearings. He caught my eye and smirked, as if to suggest none of this mattered. But there was no SUV key fob dangling from his hand, no expensive watch glinting on his wrist. His suit was ill-fitting, and his eyes darted too often toward the exit. I didn't speak to him. I didn't need to. The silence between us said enough. At home, life was stripped down to essentials. My apartment became a workshop for rebuilding, papers stacked neatly, routines set firmly, boundaries drawn cleanly. I learned that dignity doesn't arrive in grand gestures. It lives in the quiet act of refusing to collapse. By the time the bank completed their investigation and confirmed restitution would begin, I felt different. Not healed, not victorious, but steadier. Like a spine that had grown straighter under pressure. Justice was not spectacle. It was slow, deliberate, and often invisible to anyone but me. But in those long weeks of waiting and working, I learned something more important than recovery. I could live without their approval. I could breathe without their excuses. I could stand without bending, and for the first time in years, that was enough. The house I bought wasn't the one I had saved for. It wasn't the brownstone with carved railings and original floors 2 blocks from the park. That dream had slipped through my fingers in the weeks it took to file reports and wait for restitution. By the time the money began trickling back, the house was gone, sold to someone who had been ready when I wasn't. For a long time, I thought losing it was the final cruelty. But when I stood outside a smaller property months later, a modest brick home with a crooked porch light and a maple tree in the yard, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. It wasn't perfect. The kitchen needed work, the paint was peeling on the back door, and the upstairs window stuck in the summer heat. But it was mine. Purchased not only with money, but with proof that I could survive betrayal without letting it define me. The day I signed the papers, Julia handed me a takeout coffee and said quietly, "Different key, different story." She was right. Moving in felt less like crossing a finish line and more like planting a flag in new soil. I placed the essentials first: the safe, the binder of evidence, the notebook where I had written the line, "I choose fact over permission." They weren't relics of pain anymore. They were reminders of boundaries I had learned the hard way. Tiffany visited once, months after Brandon had accepted his plea deal. She stood in my new kitchen, looking smaller without his presence beside her. Her hands shook when she set down a plate of cookies she had baked. "I know this doesn't fix anything," she said, her voice unsteady. "But I wanted to see where you live. I wanted to see you." I nodded, not ready for forgiveness but not shutting the door either. "This house is different," I told her. "It has rules." She nodded, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "I understand." Whether she truly did or not, I couldn't know. But for once, she didn't argue. My parents came later, quieter than I had ever known them. They didn't defend, didn't plead. They simply sat in my living room, looking around at the mismatched furniture and the boxes I still hadn't unpacked. My father cleared his throat. "We should have believed you sooner," he said. My mother nodded, her eyes downcast. "We wanted to protect Tiffany, but we failed you instead." Their words didn't erase the years of imbalance, but they marked the beginning of something more honest. I built routines inside those walls. Mornings began with coffee on the back step, watching the maple leaves shift with the wind. Evenings ended with lights switched off in sequence, each room a quiet declaration that the space was safe. I learned the creaks of the floors, the stubbornness of the bathroom door, the way the house sighed in the middle of the night. It didn't matter that it wasn't perfect. It mattered that it was mine, the money returned piece by piece, through court-monitored payments. Each installment felt less like compensation and more like punctuation, reminders that choices have weight, that trust broken doesn't vanish without consequence. I didn't track the installments obsessively. I didn't need to. The real restitution had come the day I stopped bending myself to keep family peace. Security became part of my life, but not in a way that ruled me. I checked locks twice, updated passwords often, kept backups in places no one knew about. These weren't habits of fear. They were habits of care. Protecting myself was no longer selfish, it was essential. A year after the reunion, I hosted a small gathering. Julia and her husband brought food. A few colleagues came with flowers. My parents sat quietly in the corner, trying but not intruding. Tiffany arrived late, carrying nothing but herself. I didn't know if she would come until I saw her at the door. She hugged me lightly and whispered, "Thank you for letting me be here." The house filled with voices, not loud but steady. People who wanted nothing from me but my presence. I stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the living room, watching them laugh, pass plates, and share stories. And for the first time, I felt the weight lift fully. The betrayal had once felt like the end of everything. But standing in my own home, surrounded by people who stayed because they chose to, not because they were bound by blood, I understood something else. It had been the beginning. The dream of the brownstone had belonged to the woman who thought sacrifice alone could guarantee security. The woman I was now understood that boundaries, dignity, and truth built stronger walls than any mortgage could. When I locked the door that night, turning the new key in the new lock, I whispered to myself, "This is enough." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The story may be over, but the conversation starts now. Comment your reaction, and don't forget to like and follow.